Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive, where we're going to get into the creative process behind music production.
Oh, yeah.
We've got some incredible insights from some really innovative musicians and producers.
Definitely some big names in the industry.
And yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting journey exploring these different perspectives and maybe even challenging a few of our assumptions along the way.
You know, what's so interesting about what we're going to be talking about today is how it kind of reveals this creative tension that's
Ah.
like always present in music production.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like this push and pull between intention and accident, like striving for perfection, but also embracing flaws and then like harnessing the power of technology, but without letting it completely dominate the human element.
That's a fascinating way to put it, and I think it's a perfect segue into our first topic, which is this idea of focus and simplicity. We've got Harold Budd, who's a brilliant composer, who really champions this less is more approach.
Mhm.
Yeah, he talks about narrowing your focus, finding one small element, and making it absolutely exquisite.
It's like he's advocating for sonic minimalism, like tuning out all the distractions of like endless possibilities.
Exactly. Do you think that level of restraint is something that most producers can actually benefit from?
It's a powerful idea. And it goes beyond just music production, right? Think about any creative process or even just learning something new.
Yeah.
When you're bombarded with too many options, it can be totally paralyzing.
Oh, absolutely.
Bud's philosophy is about stripping away all that excess and just pouring your energy into like a single element, refining it until it really shines.
So it's about making intentional choices about what to include and maybe more importantly, what to leave out.
Precisely. Now, that's not to say that a minimalist approach is the only way.
Right.
Some artists thrive in a more maximalist environment, layering sounds and effects to create these really dense, intricate soundscapes. But even then, there's still this deliberate intention behind every choice.
Okay, that makes sense. It's not about limiting yourself just for the sake of it, but rather about understanding what serves the music best, whether that's a single, perfectly crafted sound or a symphony of layered elements.
Exactly.
And speaking of finding that perfect sound, it brings us to another really cool concept, this idea of finding beauty in unexpected places.
Oh, yeah.
Artist Robert Irwin talks about beauty being all around us, just waiting to be recognized and expressed. And then you have groups like the Dust Brothers who, actually embrace mistakes in their music.
I love that.
They'll stumble upon a happy accident in a recording and then build a whole song around it.
That's awesome.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what the Art of Noise, who were like pioneers of sampling, said about the limitations of early samplers like the Fairlight.
Oh, yeah.
Those restrictions actually forced them to be incredibly resourceful.
They had to work within those constraints, and in doing so, they discovered these unique techniques that became part of their signature sound.
It's a classic example of how limitations can actually spark creativity.
For sure.
It makes you wonder, does having too much freedom sometimes make it harder to be creative? Is it like having an unlimited palette of colors, but no clear vision for your painting?
That's a great question. And it leads us perfectly into the role of technology in music production.
Mm,
It's a double-edged sword, wouldn't you say?
absolutely. On one hand, you have someone like Steve Goodman, also known as Code 9, who is just fascinated by the automation capabilities of modern synths.
Yeah.
He compares it to having like 8 pairs of hands to manipulate sound.
It's incredible what you can do now.
It opens up all these possibilities that older instruments just couldn't offer.
Yeah.
But then we have Ann Dudley, who prefers non-touch sensitive synths because she feels they are more real than those trying to mimic acoustic instruments.
It's like we're trying to recapture that rawness, that human element that can sometimes get lost in the digital world.
Exactly. And then you have the irony that Jean-Michel Jarre points out.
Got that.
Using advanced technology to recreate the imperfections of older equipment.
Hmm.
It's like we're yearning for those sonic artifacts that give music a sense of life and tangibility, even as we're pushing further into the digital realm.
It's a fascinating paradox for sure.
So does all this technology ultimately enhance or hinder creativity? It seems like a complex question with no easy answers.
It really is. I think it ultimately comes down to intention and how we choose to use these powerful tools. Technology can open up a world of possibilities, but it's up to the artist to use it in a way that serves their unique vision.
Finding that sweet spot, that balance between harnessing the power of technology and preserving the human element that makes music so captivating.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've got this incredible array of tools at our fingertips, both analog and digital.
Yeah.
But how are producers actually manipulating sound to create those unique textures and effects that make their music stand out?
Well, let's start with Max Richter, who utilizes tape recording at a slower speed
Okay.
to introduce texture and unsteadiness to a sound. It's a technique that a lot of producers are drawn to because it brings in this sense of organic imperfection into their digital creations.
It's almost like adding a bit of warmth and humanity to the sometimes sterile precision of digital audio.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's this fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have these incredibly powerful digital tools, yet we're drawn to the imperfections and warmth of older analog methods.
Like we're searching for those sonic fingerprints that make music feel more alive and relatable,
Yeah.
even as we embrace the possibilities of the digital age.
Right. And speaking of manipulating sound, we see this fascination with degrading and distorting audio in the work of like so many
Yeah.
producers.
Yeah.
Burial, Clark, guy called Gerald, Jean-Michel Jarre, Tim Reaper, they're all exploring these techniques like reamping, resampling, spectral repair, convolution to achieve these really incredible sonic textures.
Can you break down some of those techniques for us? What exactly is like spectral repair or convolution, and how are they being used creatively?
It's all about pushing the boundaries of what a sound can be.
Oh.
Imagine taking a familiar sound and like twisting it, warping it until it becomes something totally new and unexpected.
Mm,
Spectral repair, for example, is a technique used to remove unwanted noise from a recording.
right.
But producers are using it creatively to isolate and manipulate specific frequencies, creating these ethereal, otherworldly textures.
Wow.
Convolution, on the other hand, involves combining two sounds together to create like a third hybrid sound.
Interesting.
It's like blending two different colors to create a new shade.
So they're taking these tools that were originally designed for specific purposes and using them in ways that were never intended.
Exactly. And one of the most intriguing examples of this is Seth Drake's explanation of squaring waveforms.
Okay.
Now, squaring a waveform might seem undesirable at first, like you're damaging the audio signal,
Yeah.
but what it actually does is introduce these sideband harmonics that contribute to a richer, fuller sound.
So it's like taking something that seems inherently destructive and turning it into something beneficial.
Precisely. It challenges our preconceived notions of what sounds good and encourages us to explore new sonic territories.
I love that. This whole idea of finding beauty in imperfection seems to tie into the concept of prioritizing the process over striving for perfection. Would you agree?
Absolutely. We see this reflected in the words of a lot of producers. Chicane, for example, talks about rejecting the pressure of creating a pristine production, instead focusing on personal satisfaction.
Okay.
And Bruce Swedian, a renowned engineer, criticizes the excessive use of compression,
Hmm.
arguing that it robs music of its dynamic range, its vibrancy and color. He feels like it creates this flat, lifeless sound, sacrificing expression for the sake of technical perfection.
So it's about finding that balance, isn't it?
Wow.
Utilizing tools and techniques to enhance the music without stripping away its raw energy and emotion.
Right. And speaking of embracing the process, Sebastian Mahler emphasizes the importance of listening and marinating in your own music.
Oh, yeah?
It's about stepping back, absorbing the sounds, and allowing the music to breathe.
It's like resisting the urge to constantly tinker and tweak, and instead allowing yourself to simply be present with the music to experience it fully before making any judgments or adjustments.
Exactly. And I think that's a valuable lesson for all of us, not just in music production, but in any creative pursuit. Letting go of the need for absolute perfection can lead to unexpected discoveries and a deeper connection to our work.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we should abandon all sense of structure and discipline. Many producers find inspiration in limitations, whether self-imposed or dictated by the tools they use. We see this with artists like A.G. Cook, James Holden, Frequent, and even Tom York.
They talk about embracing limitations as a catalyst for creativity, whether it's choosing to work with older equipment, setting specific constraints for themselves, or simply pushing the boundaries of their chosen genre.
They're challenging the notion that unlimited freedom is always a good thing. Sometimes constraints can force us to think differently, to be more resourceful, and to discover new and unexpected solutions.
It's like a sculptor working with a particularly stubborn piece of wood. The limitations of the material force them to adapt, to find new ways to express their vision.
That's a great analogy. And one of the most compelling examples of this is Tom York's experience with Electron hardware.
Oh, yeah.
He describes it as a fight with the machine, but in that struggle, he discovered unique and unexpected sounds that he wouldn't have found otherwise.
So it's about embracing that tension, that push and pull between the artist and the tool, and recognizing that limitations can actually be a springboard for innovation.
Exactly. It's about seeing limitations not as obstacles, but as opportunities to push ourselves creatively.
All right, so we've explored the power of focus and simplicity, the
Yeah.
beauty of imperfection, the role of technology, and the creative potential of limitations.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here? What about finding inspiration? Where do these artists look for those initial sparks that ignite the creative process?
That's a great question and one that we'll delve into as we continue our deep dive.
All right, sounds good. I'm excited to hear more. Stay tuned, folks, as we explore how these producers find inspiration both inside and outside the studio.
We'll be right back. Picking up where we left off, let's dive into how these artists tap into that wellspring of inspiration. Shikame, for instance, he offers some pretty intriguing advice.
Okay.
He suggests looking inward, like really inward, urging you to find the right sound inside yourself rather than relying solely on external sources.
So it's not about endlessly browsing sample packs or chasing the latest trends, but rather about connecting with your own unique musical vision.
Exactly. It's about trusting those instincts, that inner voice that guides your creative choices. And, this inward focus doesn't mean completely shutting out the outside world.
Right.
Many producers draw inspiration from field recordings, capturing the raw sounds of their surroundings to create this unique sonic palette.
Interesting.
Artists like Biosphere, Bjorky, and Lawrence English are all drawn to this technique.
It's like bringing the outside world into the studio, creating a bridge between the natural and the electronic. Imagine incorporating the sounds of a bustling city street or the quiet rustling of leaves in a forest into your music.
That's a great way to visualize it. Field recordings can provide a sense of place, a grounding in the real world that can contrast beautifully with the synthetic sounds of electronic music.
Yeah.
They can evoke specific moods and textures, adding this layer of depth and complexity to your sonic tapestry.
It's like using sound to paint a picture, capturing not just the visual elements, but also the emotional essence of a place.
Mm.
And it's not just about capturing sounds from the environment. Many producers draw inspiration from a wide range of sources, from classical music theory to film scores, even everyday sounds and textures.
They're constantly absorbing information, filtering it through their own unique lens, and transforming it into something new and exciting. It's this constant process of exploration and discovery, and it goes beyond just the sonic realm. Inspiration can come from anywhere, from a piece of visual art to a thought-provoking conversation to a simple walk in nature.
It's like opening yourself up to the world around you, allowing those seemingly disparate elements to converge and spark new ideas. And speaking of unexpected sources of inspiration, let's circle back to this idea of creative tension that we've been kind of exploring throughout this whole deep dive.
Right.
It seems to be a recurring theme.
Yeah.
This push and pull between opposing forces. And
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how this tension manifests itself in the realm of inspiration.
That's a great observation, and I think it's really at the heart of what makes the creative process so fascinating. There's this constant tension between seeking out inspiration and allowing it to find you, between consciously pursuing ideas and embracing those moments of serendipity, when something unexpected just sparks your imagination.
So it's about finding that balance, isn't it? Between actively searching for inspiration and creating the space for it to kind of emerge organically.
Exactly. And this tension extends to the sources of inspiration themselves. Sometimes we find ourselves drawn to things that are familiar, comforting within our comfort zone.
Yeah.
But true creative growth often comes from venturing outside of that comfort zone, from exploring new and unfamiliar territories, even if it feels a bit unsettling at times.
So it's about embracing that discomfort, that sense of the unknown, as a catalyst for creativity.
Absolutely. It's about challenging your assumptions, pushing your boundaries, and allowing yourself to be surprised by what you discover. Think about what Fredgend does, using drones to create this harmonic landscape that underpins the emotional arc of his music.
It's like he's creating this sonic foundation, a canvas upon which to build his musical ideas.
Exactly. And he's not afraid to experiment, to push the boundaries of what's considered conventional. And this willingness to experiment, to break free from linear workflows, is something we see in the work of producers like A.G. Cook, James Holden, and very important.
They're constantly tinkering, exploring new approaches, and pushing the boundaries of their tools. A.G. Cook even talks about the creative potential of recording a whole piece of music in one take without the opportunity to second-guess or overthink it.
It's about capturing that raw energy, that initial spark of inspiration before it gets diluted by too much analysis and self-criticism. It's about trusting your instincts and letting the music flow through you.
It's almost like a form of sonic meditation, allowing the music to emerge organically without imposing too much conscious control. And this idea of surrendering to the process of letting go of control seems to be a common thread among many of these producers.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that the creative process is not always linear. There will be detours and unexpected turns along the way, and
Yeah.
sometimes those detours lead to the most rewarding discoveries.
So it's about embracing that sense of adventure, that willingness to get lost in the process and see where it takes you.
Exactly. And this ties back to the idea of creative tension. It's that interplay between intention and surrender, between control and letting go, between the desire to shape the music and the willingness to allow it to shape. You remember what Sebastian Millert said about marinating in his music?
Oh, yeah.
He's talking about immersing himself in the sounds, allowing them to wash over him, and letting the music guide his decisions.
It's like he's stepping into the music, becoming a part of it, rather than trying to impose his will upon it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of creative tension, the tension between perfection and imperfection.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this tension between perfection and imperfection.
Well, think about it in the digital realm. It's easier than ever to create a perfectly polished, technically flawless recording.
Yeah.
But so many producers are intentionally introducing imperfections, those human touches, to counterbalance the sterility that can sometimes creep into digital music.
So it's like they're pushing back against the pursuit of sonic perfection, recognizing that those imperfections are often what make music feel alive and relatable.
Exactly. Remember what Hudson Mohawk said about simple tracks often being more than the sum of their parts?
Mhm.
He's acknowledging that there's this magic that happens when you combine seemingly simple elements in a way that creates something greater, something that transcends the individual parts. And this magic often lies in the subtle imperfections, those human touches that give music its character and soul.
It's like a chef adding a pinch of salt to a dish.
Oh,
It's a seemingly insignificant ingredient, but it brings out the flavor, enhances the overall experience.
that's a great analogy. And Jacob Collier, a master of musical innovation, actively pursues wonkiness in his grooves, intentionally deviating from the grid to add a human element to the rigid precision of computers.
So he's intentionally introducing these little quirks, these deviations from the expected, to make the music feel more alive and spontaneous.
Exactly. It's like he's embracing the imperfections that make music feel human and relatable, those little nuances that make us tap our feet and move our bodies. And Dave Hickey's analysis of the Rolling Stones' music highlights this beautifully. He points out that their music is filled with these tiny, almost imperceptible rhythmic imperfections.
And it's those imperfections that create a sense of groove, a swagger, that you wouldn't get from a perfectly quantized performance.
Precisely. It's a reminder that perfection is not always the goal. Sometimes it's those imperfections, those deviations from the norm that make music truly captivating. And this applies to all forms of art, not just music. Think about a perfectly symmetrical face. It might be technically flawless, but it often lacks character and personality.
It's those little asymmetries, those unique imperfections that make a face memorable and expressive.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that beauty can be found in the unexpected, in the imperfections that make something unique and individual. And this ties back to the idea of creative tension. It's that interplay between control and randomness, between intention and accident, between the pursuit of perfection and the acceptance of imperfection.
It's fascinating how this concept of creative tension keeps weaving its way through all these different aspects of the music production process,
Yeah.
from finding inspiration to embracing imperfection. But how do we actually harness this tension in our own work? How do we find that balance between control and surrender, between precision and imperfection?
That's a great question, and one that we'll continue to explore as we move into the final part of our deep dive. But for now, I think it's worth reflecting on the diverse perspectives we've encountered so far.
Good.
What resonates with you? What inspires you? And how can you apply these insights to your own creative journey?
We've been on this journey exploring creative tension and how it really shapes the music production process. But what does all this mean for us, the listeners? How can we take these insights from these incredible artists and apply them to our own creative endeavors, whether it's music writing, design, or anything really?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How do we take all these different perspectives and turn them into something practical, something we can actually use to fuel our own creative fire?
Exactly. I think that's what a lot of us are searching for, those actionable insights that can help us kind of unlock our creative potential.
Well, one of the most important things to remember is that there's no one size fits all formula for creativity, right? What works for one person might not work for another.
Hmm.
The key is to be open to experimentation, try different approaches, and find what really resonates with you.
So it's not about trying to copy what these other artists are doing,
Yeah.
but rather about finding your own unique path, your own voice.
Absolutely. And that's where this idea of creative tension comes in. It's about embracing those seemingly contradictory forces,
Mm.
control and surrender, intention and accident, perfection and imperfection.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot where those opposing forces can work together to create something truly unique and expressive.
It's like walking a tightrope.
Hmm?
You need a certain level of control and skill to stay balanced, but you also need to be willing to let go a little, to trust your instincts and allow yourself to be guided by the unexpected.
Exactly.
We talked about Chicane rejecting the pressure of a pristine environment and focusing on personal satisfaction, and Bruce Swedian's critique of using too much compression and how it robs music of its excitement and color.
Yeah, they're both advocating for a more intuitive, less controlled approach to music production.
They're encouraging us to trust our ears, to let go of the need for absolute perfection, and to allow the music to breathe and evolve organically.
Right. And think about Dave Hickey's analysis of the Rolling Stones. Their music is full of these tiny, almost imperceptible rhythmic imperfections. And
Right.
it's those imperfections that give their music its groove, its swagger.
It's about finding that balance, the sweet spot where precision and imperfection kind of collide to create something truly captivating. But how do we actually apply this to our own creative work? How do we find that balance between control and surrender, intention and accident?
Well, I think it starts with being mindful of this creative tension, recognizing that it's a natural part of the process. Instead of resisting it, embrace it. Allow yourself to experiment, to take risks, to trust your intuition. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, to deviate from the plan, to explore uncharted territory.
So it's not about throwing out all the rules and just going crazy, but rather about finding that middle ground where those opposing forces can work together to create something new and exciting.
Exactly. It's about understanding that the creative process is a journey, not a destination. It's about embracing the unknown, the unexpected, and allowing yourself to be surprised by what you discover along the way.
It's like setting off on an adventure without a map. You might have a general idea of where you want to go, but you're open to taking detours, exploring new paths, and discovering those hidden treasures along the way.
And sometimes those unexpected detours lead to the most rewarding discoveries. So as you embark on your own creative journey, remember to embrace the creative tension, trust your instincts, and allow yourself to be surprised by the unexpected.
Who knows, you might just stumble upon something truly magical along the way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the creative process. We'll see you next time for another exploration of the minds behind the music.